Hello students, welcome to the second session in the series on Jacques Derrida's essay Structure, Sign and Play in the Discourse of the Human Sciences. As in the previous session, we had discussed that this essay is actually a lecture presented by Jacques Derrida at Johns Hopkins International Colloquium on the Language of Criticism and the Sciences of Man in October 1966. And in the previous session, we had discussed that how Jacques Derrida propounded his philosophical concepts as a critique of structuralism. And this essay is considered to be the path-breaking article in this direction. This essay articulates a post-structuralist theoretical paradigm, and it is divided into two parts. In the first part, there is an examination of the shifting relationship between structure and center, or in one phrase, or in a Derridian phrase, we can say he is talking about the structurality of structure. And in the second part, there is an analysis of Levi-Strauss concepts regarding the problem of thinking through the relationship between structure and center. So today in this session, we are going to focus on the first part of the essay where Derrida is talking about his views regarding the concept of structure and center. Students, at the very outset, Derrida introduces the idea that some event has occurred, and this event is referred to as some sort of rupture or break. Actually, here Derrida is talking about an epistemological break, a break in the philosophy of knowledge, in the philosophy of thought. And to be more specific, we can say he is talking or he is referring to a major shift in the fundamental structure of Western philosophy. Now the question arises that why a shift or break has taken place. A shift has taken place because there is a questioning about the structurality of the structure, that every system has a structure. So what is that very specificity which gives structurality to that structure? So questioning about the structurality of the structure caused a shift or a break in the philosophy of thought or the philosophy of knowledge. And in other words, we can say that this is the moment, this event is the moment when structuralism, as we have seen and discussed in the previous session, that Derrida was initially a structuralist and they were discussing what the challenges in the field of structuralist school of philosophy. So when the structuralist pointed out that the language was indeed a structure, and it became possible to think abstractly about the idea of structure itself, that how every system, whether language or philosophy itself, had a structure. For a better understanding, I have an example for you that a gardener is there, okay, and that gardener is taking care of a particular flower bed, that is of roses in a garden. And now he is taking care of that flower bed as part of a structure. Then one day he starts thinking about that what special care should be given to that very flower bed of roses in comparison to the other ones. So the very moment he started thinking about the special nature or the special treatment for that very flower bed, means he is not thinking about that flower bed as a part of a structure, but he is thinking about that flower bed as a structure in itself. So this is how a moment, a break, a shift has took place. So about this very break or shift Derrida is talking about, that the moment when philosophers begin to see their philosophical systems not as absolute truths, but as systems, but as constructs, but as structures. So in this way, that a shift took place with the questioning of the structurality, and with this questioning there arose an issue that is there any center to hold a structure? Is there any fixed center, or is there a moving center? So a radical decentering with the questioning of the structurality of the structure took place, and we will talk in detail that how with this structurality, questioning about the structurality of the structure, a radical decentering, the concept of radical decentering appeared. Derrida begins with his firm belief in the presence of the concept of structure in the field of science and philosophy, and as far as the structuralist view is concerned, it defines the structurality of a structure as a process of referring to a point of presence, to a fixed origin, which gives it centrality, or we can say it refers to structure as a process giving importance to the presence of a center. So a structure assumes a center, and that very center is always there in a structure to give it order to that structure, to organize that structure, to balance that structure, to orient its elements, and at the same time to limit the free play of the elements within the structure. Here, the one point is to be taken care of, that Derrida is talking about that a center is there, and a center is just balancing that structure by limiting the free play of the elements within. Thus, by limiting the free play of the elements, a center organizes a structure. So now the question is that where this center is situated. So as the structure is organized around a center, so it means center is within the structure. But at the same time, the another side of the picture is that we are looking at center as a governing principle. We are looking at center as an organizing element, as an element that is orienting or balancing the other elements, that is limiting the free play of the elements within a structure. So it means as a governing principle, as an organizing element, center is not within the structure, but center is something beyond the transformative reach of the structure. So now paradoxically, center is both places. It is within the structure and outside it. That is the point that Derrida calls center a varied part of system or structure. Derrida looks at structure diachronically and synchronically. Actually, students, Derrida's critique of structuralism is based on the idea of a center for a structure. He believes in the existence of structure, but where the center is, at this point he critiques structuralism, and he looks at structure diachronically and synchronically. Diachronically, we can say that examining the history of the structures, Derrida elaborates that one center gets replaced by another. Thus, the factors governing the play of the elements to get epistemologically shifted. But synchronically, as a freeze frame at a particular juncture, what happens? At a given moment, the center of the structure cannot be substituted by various permutations, but historically, the center can get replaced. Looking at the structure diachronically, Derrida talks about structure as a continual substitution of one centered system for another centered system before the rupture, before the event which took place, which occurred, which he has referred in the very opening of his discussion. And after the rupture, what happened? That there is center is not a natural site, and now center is considered to be a construct. And here one thing is to be noted that Derrida views that concept of center does work, but it is not essential. Means center is always under erasure. A center is needed to form a structure, but immediately it escapes from the so-called centrality. So here the center is being looked at as a construct. Derrida in fact is not suggesting to abandon the idea of center, but rather he acknowledges that it is illusory, it is constructed, and looking at center as a construct, Derrida attacks the concept of logocentrism, because logocentrism is an assumption or the quest for a core, an essence, or an ultimate truth. But Derrida is not favoring this logocentrism, because he is looking at center as something illusory. So now the question is that where and how did this concept of decentering occur? As Derrida refers to the three great philosophers, from where he has took this very idea of decentering. The one is Nietzsche's critique of metaphysics, then there is Freudian critique of self-presence, and then Heideggerian destruction of metaphysics. We'll talk about all three. First, we'll take Nietzsche's critique of metaphysics. Students, Friedrich Nietzsche is a well-known German philosopher and cultural critic, and he is famous for uncompromising criticism of traditional European morality and religion, as well as of conventional philosophical ideas. And as far as his very critique of metaphysics is concerned, which Derrida has referred in this essay, is actually the critique of the concepts of truth and being, and that begin with his pronouncement that about the death of God. Means he denied that God is not there, God is not the center of the metaphysics. So this very critique of metaphysics also paved the ground for a radical decentering. Then there is Freud's critique of self-presence. Students, Sigmund Freud was an eminent Austrian neurologist and founder of psychoanalysis. And his critique of self-presence, which is referred by Derrida, is actually the critique of consciousness, is the critique of self-identity, of self-proximity. Because Derrida is referring to Freud's concept of self-presence with reference to Derrida's emphasis on the power of subconscious. So the critique of conscious is also referring to the decentering, the concept of decentering. Then there is Heidegger's concept of destruction of metaphysics. Students, Martin Heidegger was a German philosopher whose work is associated with phenomenology and existentialism. And here, one thing which, if all of you might be familiar with this very concept of metaphysics. Metaphysics inquires about the being of beings, about the existence of beings, but it reduces being to a being. It does not think of being as a being. So insofar as being itself is obliterated in it, so metaphysics is nihilism. So in this way, Heidegger critiques the very concept of metaphysics. And so in this critique of metaphysics, in this destruction of metaphysics by Heidegger, he is critiquing the determination of being a presence, being as a presence. And his emphasis is on re-examination of the conventional metaphysics of being and time. So to rethink a particular system, to rethink a particular structure means the existing center is not being accepted as a fixed center. So the very philosophies which were propounded by these three philosophers paved the ground for Derrida points out that Nietzsche, Freud and Heidegger, they used the very logic of metaphysics in their critique of metaphysics. He says, I quote, all these descriptive discourses, all their analogues are trapped in a sort of circle. This circle is unique. It describes the form of relationship between the history of metaphysics and the destruction of the history of metaphysics. So according to Derrida, there is no sense in doing without the concept of metaphysics in order to attack metaphysics. He feels we have no language, no syntax, no lexicon which is alien to this history. He opines that metaphysics of presence is attacked with the help of the concept of sign. And here he makes it very clear that any signified is not fixed, because the binaries of structure are not true representations of an eternal reality. Rather, they are simply constructions. So signified seeks meanings. So when it seeks meaning, it becomes signifier. So there is a chain of signifiers. There is no constant existence of signified. So it means, here students, I repeat, as in the previous session, we have discussed about Saussure's concept of sign, signifier and signified. So the very concept here is using that the metaphysics of presence can be attacked with the help of the concept of sign only. And he is pointing out the fluid relationship between sign and signifier and how this fluidity takes place, that if a sign is there and a signifier is there and is signifying something, so that signified is not fixed, because the binary of a structure are not true representation of eternal reality. A particular signified seeks meaning, and when it seeks meaning, it becomes signifier. So there is a chain of signifiers, and this chain of signifiers means there is no center, there is no margin, there is no totality. So as a result, meaning is not determined. No center is fixed. And he illustrates with the example of ethnology that with the evolution of ethnology in Europe, Eurocentrism was questioned. But in place of Eurocentrism, meanwhile, ethnology itself evolved as ethnocentrism. So Eurocentrism was replaced by ethnocentrism. So in this way, there is a chain of signifiers, and there is a sort of process of decentering which is happening. It is not that no fixed center is there. Okay, the center is not completely removed, but center is always under eraser. So here Derrida presents his concept of structure with a radical decentering. He questioned, he critiqued the very concept of structuralism just only on the idea of center for a structure. So students, this is all for today. Thank you.